Ireland's only theme park, but is it worth a trip? Let's dive into Emerald Park's ride lineup and decide what should be kept and what should be scrapped. Right, so just like I've done in other videos recently, I'm going to start with their headline attraction, or at least their newest attraction, because you could argue there's two headline attractions in this park. So we're going to talk about Fianna Force. Now, this is a Vekoma STC, and as far as I'm aware, there currently is only two, one here and one somewhere in Europe. Now, some of you may be familiar with a Vekoma SLC, suspended looping coaster. Those things are horrific. Think of Infusion over in Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Absolute headbangers, and every single one I've been on is a disaster, possibly with the exception of Flamingoland's Kamali, because it's a custom layout. But the STC, the suspended thrill coaster, is completely different. How these are manufactured by the same company is, I just do not understand, because this thing is fantastic. So much fun, just exhilarating, and I just lapped this thing. We went on a trip there and there was an ERT with your experience guide, and we took advantage of it because the ride is fantastic. So we're going to start strong and we're going to start with a keep. Now, as part of that area, Tirnano, I think it's called, they put in a couple of other attractions, and one of them was Quest. Now, this is a simple Vekoma boomerang, and to be honest with you, there's nothing special about it. I mean, a boomerang's a boomerang. I say nothing special about it. The spike at the end, I believe, is very custom and taller than most. But when I was there, the problem with this area is that, and hopefully this will be improved upon in 2025, when I went last year, it was incomplete, right? I think they stuck to their opening date, irrespective of whether it was complete or not. So there was bits of this that still looked like a building site. There was just concrete buildings that hadn't been themed. That sort of partly played into this. There's some fantastic interactions between Quest and Fianna Force, don't get me wrong, but it is still a boomerang. So again, I don't like scrapping coasters, and it's brand new, so I'm not going to do that, but I will put this one in the take it or leave it pile. Right, so switching up completely, they do have a boat ride there that is mental, is probably the best word for it. So it's Viking Voyage, or I think it's actually got a really long name, but we'll call it Viking Voyage. So I went on this, and stupidly I went on this with Dave from Loops and Lap Bars, and we both sat in the front because we wanted to get POVs. That was a really stupid idea. It's a really, 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 really long ride. Interestingly, people have commented, I put a POV up on this, and some have said it's hilarious that they actually have staff kind of around the ride to kind of tell you to sit down. I mean, you get that in things like Congo River Rapids at Towers, but I guess what they were trying to say is, like, why not just have a speaker system and some CCTV? In any case, this is a very long ride with multiple drops, etc. The final one, you're going to get soaked, guaranteed. I was absolutely drenched. Great fun, but definitely not one that you would lap multiple times, and probably fantastic on a nice hot summer's day. Oh, by the way, I'm going to keep it. Right, now another attraction they've got that is odd is their 5D cinema. Now, I mean, parks have 3D, 4D, 5D cinemas. I'm not quite sure what makes it 5D. I mean, you've got the motion of the seats, you've got 3D on the screen, and then you've got effects that spray you. Some people call this 4D, some call it 5D. I was underwhelmed by it. Definitely not impressed in any shape or form. The movie wasn't spectacular. The effects were a bit meh. So I'm going to scrap this. Right, moving on to one of their flat rides, and a flat ride I actually really enjoy. That is Air Race. Now, there's a similar one to this at Drayton Manor. The big difference is that the one in Emerald Park, each one of the planes only holds 2 passengers. The one in Drayton is 2-tiered, so you get 4 passengers in it. So from a throughput point of view, that's a little bit of a concern. It doesn't chew through as many people as some of the other models, but it's great fun. Right? I mean, it's literally just you going round in a circle and constantly going upside down, and I love being upside down. So as far as flat rides go, I'm going to keep it. On the flip side though, there's another flat ride outside that 5D cinema. It's a weird one, I think. Now, it's called Power Surge. I can't remember the model name. It's a weird one. It's kind of like a big wheel that goes round, and there's seats on it, 2 seats back to back that kind of rotate. So the rotation of those seats is a bit like Air Race that we just talked about, and it's kind of on a wheel, a bit like an Enterprise style thing that kind of rotates and lifts up and stuff. It's odd. It's very, very, very strange. It's probably the best that I could describe it. I have had some good rides on it, but generally speaking, I haven't. And I just think it looks interesting, but not in a, oh, I'm going to sit and watch that. It's just a, what the hell is that? So I'm gonna scrap this one. I just said there that that was a little bit Enterprise-like, and I mean, only in that it's a kind of disc that rotates. This next one, again, I'm gonna say is Enterprise-like, and you're all gonna tell me it's not, and I get it. But this is Endeavour. So this one is a ring with seats. This time the seats are just kind of suspended from it. So the way the seats are suspended is a little bit like the Vekoma SLC or STC, right? You've got two seats suspended from this disc, effectively. Over the shoulder restraints, if I remember correctly. But then it is a bit like Enterprise in that this kind of rotates really fast and then kind of lifts up. It doesn't quite get vertical, but it gets up to a reasonable angle. And this one's got a decent force in it. There's definitely some good forces in this one. Unlike Enterprise, where you're kind of encapsulated in this sort of thing and you're not strapped in, you are strapped in this. So yeah, I think it's good fun, and it is definitely one that I would add to that keep list. Right, now the park's got a couple of little coasters. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Flight School. Now, this is an interesting one. I mean, look, these little coasters are clearly not targeted at me, right? It's aimed at the younger audience. I find this one really interesting in that when you walk into that, the original, like you walk into the building and it's themed like an airport. You've got the departure lounge, you've got arrivals. Like the theming in there is fantastic. Really, really, really well done. And then the trains are sort of themed after planes to fashion. It's a pretty dull, meandering track. You go around it twice, so you get 2 photos if you're getting the photos. Listen, again, it's not aimed at me, and I don't like scrapping coasters, so I will put this one in take it or leave it. Right, if you could do me a favour, if you think the Chullain is a fantastic ride, hit that like button for me. And if you're feeling really generous, hit subscribe as well. And then we've got another kids coaster, and this one's called Dino Dash. Trains are quite well themed. They're sort of, I think they're sort of Jeep-like, if I remember correctly. The weird thing about this, so this ride's quite new. I don't know the exact year, but you're talking maybe 5 years-ish, 6, 7 years at push. It's pretty new, right? And in the Chullain, they have some dinosaurs, right? It's called Dino Dash, makes sense. The dinosaurs are not new though. They've apparently been reused from somewhere else, and they didn't tart them up. So they're falling apart and look absolutely horrific. So that's not great. It's another 2-lap special. There is this weird bit when you leave the station that there's like a dinosaur that squirts water, and I can't figure out if it just randomly does it and there's a chance you're going to get hit, or if it intentionally doesn't do it when the train goes past. I've never been hit by it, but you see it happening and I'm like, is there a sensor to say trains going, don't do it? So anyway, it's an okay coaster. Again, not aimed at me, but as I said earlier, I don't like removing coasters, so this one's also going in that take it or leave it pile. Right, I started this talking about their headline attraction and said that they had 2. So the other one is the Chullain, and this thing is fantastic. So their wooden coaster, I would say it's probably, well, it's not in the UK, is it? It's the one of the best wooden coasters in the British Isles. Now, I never got on Megaphobia. It doesn't look like I'm ever going to get on Megaphobia. And I do believe that was also a contender for one of the best coasters, wooden coasters in the UK. But this one is just relentless. It is fantastic. I went on it multiple times on my first visit, front row to get POVs, back row later in the day. Like that thing when it's warmed up, I think it was slightly raining, so it was kind of a moist rail. It was later in the day, it was back row. It was just bizarre. My partner absolutely loved it. You've probably heard this already. She enjoys wooden coasters more than steel coasters, but this one, she came off it and she was just dazed. It was unbelievable. Fantastic coaster. Highly recommend it. Annoyingly, when we went for our second trip to the park, it was closed for maintenance for an extended period of time for some maintenance. But yeah, listen, this is absolutely fantastic and no surprises, I'm gonna keep it. Something that's not so great though is their gyro swing thing called Rotator. It feels like it's sort of on its last legs and it's limping home because it's kind of pathetic. Like, I don't know, there's obviously a lot of talk about is Blackpool getting a gyro swing, etc. I hope if they do, they get a decent one with some force, because this thing has no force at all. I mean, it does rotate and it does swing half-heartedly. It's just a letdown. Like, I enjoy a gyro, but I didn't enjoy this one. So this one is going in that scrap pile. Right, there's one more kids coaster, and I have done it because, you know, I like a cred. I'm shameless in that respect, and that is their Ladybird Loop. Now, as the name suggests, it's themed after ladybirds. It's a spinning coaster to a fashion, like the cars do rotate. There's 3 or 4 cars joined together, kind of going slowly around this sort of figure of 8 style track. It's a bit more than a figure of 8, but kind of like that. You get 2 or 3 laps on it. Again, as I've said with the others, clearly not aimed at me. And I think for young children, this is probably one of their first coasters. Very little kids. I mean, they would love it. Probably be terrified by it. For me, it's not meant to do anything for me, but it doesn't. So it's a take it or leave it. This next one kind of flies against everything I've ever said in any of my other review videos, because if you've seen them before, you know that where a park has a steam train, or train of some description, I'm a fan of it. I'm usually like, right, perfect, I've just had my lunch, let's get on the train, chill out for 15 minutes, go around the park, happy days. They've got one. It's nothing like that. It's probably the fastest train I have ever been on. Probably gives British Rail a run for their money. It is just crazy. Like, you don't go at a slow enough pace to take anything in. It's quite a small route, but you absolutely fly around it at a ridiculous rate of knots. It just does not make any sense. So despite the fact that conceptually I like these style of rides, this particular one, yeah, not so much. So I'm gonna scrap it. Right, going back to their new area, Tierney Row, there was a 3rd attraction added. Now, I've not experienced this one firsthand, so I'm gonna judge this based on other rides of its type. And it's basically the Celtic Swinger, so it's a wave swing. And I do like a wave swing, so I'm gonna assume this is a good one. I could be wrong. I could be giving it credit where it's not due, but assuming that it is a standard wave swinger and therefore is enjoyable, or at least enjoyable to me, I'm gonna keep it. And there's one thing about this park that's slightly frustrating. There are a number of SB&O attractions. If you don't know, that's standing but not operating. They did at some point have this kind of, I don't know what it's called, sky coaster maybe? It's one of those ones where you kind of hang from, so it's like a rail and you're on it, like in a harness, and you just whee. I did one at Gulliver's. So they've got one of them, 2 tracks by the looks of it. And in the last couple of years since that, I think it closed in COVID and it's never reopened, and I don't think it's going to now. Which is kind of annoying because you still see it there. And so you're kind of looking at this thing going, oh, I want to get on that. And you can't go on that. So that's kind of annoying. Similarly, they've got this skywalk thing. So kind of like treetop trail climbing frame thing. I think that does run sometimes throughout the year. I believe it's a seasonal thing. I could be completely wrong here. It might never open at all. But that's kind of annoying because, well, there's nothing worse than going into a park and seeing something and going, oh, I want to do that. And then you find it's not running. You know, it's kind of annoying. So hopefully they either reopen these things or demolish them, because there's nothing worse than something standing but not operating. I do have a notable entry here, and it's not one I'm going to put into any category per se. I was looking through their ride lineup and I noticed that they had a swing for wheelchairs, which I think is fantastic. It's not something you see a lot of. I can't think of any other parks that I've visited. I'm not a wheelchair user, so I wouldn't be looking for it, but this is quite clearly in their ride lineup on their website, and when I look through other websites, I don't see that. So hats off to them for having an accessible option for those that need it. Right, as always, if I've done the numbers right, there's more keeps than scraps, which is always nice to hear. Although I do think this park does have a little bit of a way to go. They've obviously invested an absolute fortune in their new area, so hopefully they are turning a corner. But yeah, I think they need to review that ride lineup. Obviously there's more to this park than just rides. It does have a zoo as well, which is always fantastic. But if you've been to the park, I'd love to know your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with these. And if you've enjoyed this one, hit that like button and subscribe to make this number go up. I've been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad, and I shall see you in the next one. Adios.